Welcome everybody here on Kensington campus. We're live streaming, as I mentioned, so a big welcome to our Canberra campus and also our Art and Design campus. And also we may have people in other rooms around this campus where we're live streaming to, so welcome everybody. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting here, so that's the Bejigal people. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in our Canberra campus, the Ngunnawal people. And finally, over in Art and Design in Paddington, we have the Gadigal people. I'd really like to start with some thanks. So I'd really like to thank Bianca, Dom and Kylie for managing the logistics of today, administering everything, making sure that my slides actually worked just in time. Thank you guys. I'd also like to thank Cecilia, Rebecca, Lena, Dom and all their teams for getting the content together for today's presentations. I'm going to be kicking things off. I'm then going to be handing over to my colleague Jonathan Morris, the Deputy Dean of Graduate Research. And then Jonathan will be handing across to Lucy Jones, the Director of the Graduate Research School. We've actually really just produced something which is giving you a flavour of some of the things we've been doing. Our last research training town hall, I am amazed to remember, was nearly 2 years ago. And so we really want to tell you some of the things that we've done since then and some of the important upcoming things that are happening that you do need to know about. We're going to try and go through it quite quickly because we do want you to ask questions. And as I mentioned before, we're on Slido. Each of the slides do have the Slido tag on it. So once you've gotten onto slido.com, if you just add that hashtag in there, you can ask questions throughout. And at the end, we do have an afternoon tea where we can mingle and answer any other questions that you need. And we will try and get finished most of the formalities by around 4:15. But first, I really want to, remember why we're all here. I think we're all here because we're really engaged and passionate about developing the research leaders of today and tomorrow.
I work out in the Pilbara of Western Australia and I study some of the earliest evidence of life on the planet. These things called stromatolites, and they're essentially rock structures that are built by communities of microorganisms. Stromatolites are important because they actually preserve the earliest signs of life on the planet, and what really drew me into astrobiology was the perspective that it brings on life. As you learn about science, you find out more about the world that you live in. And so astrobiology is really like taking our, what seems to be, a sort of bubble existence here on Earth and really putting it into context. I chose to do a PhD simply because during my Masters I realised how much I loved research and how much I really loved teaching. I think to be a good teacher you should be up to date with the research, and I think also to be a good researcher or even to be a good scientist, you should be involved in teaching and at least some form of scientific outreach. We actually designed a virtual field trip based on our scientific observations in the Pilbara, and this was made for two reasons. One, to teach about geology, early life, and also astrobiology, but also to show how science is done. UNSW has been great in supporting my work. I've been able to attend international conferences, do multiple field work trips, access to optical microscopes, a whole bunch of different chemical analysis through the Mark Wainwright Centre. Anything that I really need to get done I can usually do on campus, and if not, we have lots of collaborations with other universities that I can outsource to. There's a lot of funding opportunities, and there's also a lot of postgraduate help if you go out and look for it. I definitely have realised how much potential I have as a researcher, but it's taken me about 5 years to really sink my teeth in and understand how research is done. I still definitely feel like a student at this point, but I can see my skills increasing every single year.
Pretty amazing. So what I wanted to do first was to give you a bit of a flavour of the Australian environment. So really looking at research training across the whole of the country. A couple of years ago, the Australian government commissioned a report by the Australian Council of Learned Academies on the research training system and how we were faring. And they came out with 5 key areas that we really do need to look at moving into the future. I just wanted to give you a flavour of these and the progress on implementation of these. This came out in a report in July 2018, and we as a university have been integrally involved with developing some of these outcomes through the Australian Council of Graduate Research, but also internally we've been implementing some of the actions on our own underneath each of these priority areas. So Pathways to Higher Degree Research Training was a big part of what the review showed up, preparedness for going into a PhD. And UNSW has, over the last year, reviewed the Master of Philosophy, and they will be implementing the Master of Philosophy as a pathway program into the PhD. Concurrently, our Faculty of Business has also been looking at pathway programs, and they have developed a pathway program, a master's program, as a distinctive pathway into the PhD. So those are just a couple of examples of some of the things that we're doing to ensure great preparedness in our PhDs. Industry-university collaboration is another area. Why are we concerned about this? Well, certainly the National Innovation Science Agenda has a big focus on industry and industry collaboration and innovation. But as a sector, when you're thinking about research training, you actually realise very quickly that not all of the PhDs we train go into either research or the academy. So we need to be mindful of how we're preparing our researchers for going out there into the world and for making sure that they have some of the other skills that they can use in different sectors. Certainly industry-university collaboration is one key area that we have been focusing on, and I'll mention that in a few slides' time. Equity, including Indigenous participation, has been a big focus over the past year. Our University Higher Degree Committee is looking at equity in admissions and equity scholarships. We've also embedded Indigenous programs within our CNT programs, and Jonathan will mention that. Quality of the higher degree research system, certainly two key drivers that were mentioned specifically as priority issues were supervision and development of transferable skills, those professional and non-technical skills that really are valued by employers. So those are two key areas that we will be speaking about in, again, a few slides' time. And finally, data and evidence. The Commonwealth has certainly put a lot more pressure on us as institutions to make sure that we're collecting data on quality of our programs, but also that we're collecting more data. So there's a lot of pressure on us to really work out our systems, and the team has been working very hard on improving our systems so that we can be more compliant in some of these areas. It's useful to have a look at how we implement policy across the university as well. So I thought it would be just good to let you know that this has been a resource that we've developed over this year. It's our University of New South Wales Research Training Policy Framework. You can see there's a web link there. You can go to that web link. You can have a look at this whole framework, and each of the areas you can click through directly to the policy. So what it shows you is the research training, all of the policy areas that you need to know about, either as a higher degree researcher, as a supervisor, as a postgrad coordinator, even as an early career researcher. So we would encourage you to engage in that. This is part of our effort to make sure that we're very transparent in a lot of the things that we're implementing in our policy and practices. So for today, I'm just going to run through some of the initiatives that we've been involved with over the past year or so. Supervision and skills, the first one. Industry university programs. Jonathan will touch on our CNT initiatives and publications in Thesis. We have a big push on high quality publications, and this is incredibly related to that. And finally, probably what a lot of you want to hear about is the higher degree research calendar that's going to be starting next year with the introduction of 3+, and Lucy will be telling you about that. So supervision quality. As we all know, high quality supervision is absolutely core to any high quality, higher degree research program. Good supervision results in good outcomes for the higher degree research candidate, but also good outcomes for the university in terms of great research outputs in whatever form the discipline produces outputs. So one of the key areas that we've been focusing on is implementing a framework for supervisor development. So for making sure that our supervisors are well across best practices and are engaging with the best practices for supervision. So the first area that we've actually already completed is mandatory face-to-face training for people who are new to supervision. So these are all of our staff who haven't supervised more than 2 candidates in their career. We have now completed training or introduction of the training across all of our faculties. Some of our faculties have gone through a second round of training, and this is something that will be done annually. And certainly it's something that has been very, very well received. And Cecilia Stenstrom and the RDU team has been responsible for rolling this out across the university. The next 2 areas of supervision development or supervisor development that we're working on are the new to UNSW, which is a mandatory online program for people who have just started at UNSW or have only been here for about a year. And really the focus there is much more on understanding our policy. And then finally, there is something that is under development and will be introduced later in 2019 on looking at experienced supervisors and really driving the development of our experienced supervisors through the direct reports, the My Career conversations, and the career development processes that are being implemented in the university under Strategy 2025. So this program is only one part of the quality aspects that we're doing in supervisor development, but it's certainly something that I think has already shown great strides. Focusing back on the HDR candidates themselves, as I mentioned before, transferable skills and development of transferable skills is seen as absolutely essential from the employer perspective. But I think more and more the higher degree researchers are also understanding that embedding these transferable skills in everything they do is making them better researchers. I think as Tanya in the video explained, I think that's, if you get better at doing a lot of the activities, the academic activities, including research and teaching, you actually start to develop many more skills which make you a better researcher. So the way that we're doing this is through a higher degree, in essence, career development framework. And that framework really has some areas that are focused specifically on the higher degree researcher. So what are the sorts of things I can do to manage my candidature? What are the sorts of things that I can do to manage my research project and develop skills there? But then there are other things like how do I become a leader? How do I work well with others and collaborate? How do I build my profile? Work out where to publish in high quality journals. Do I want to do teaching, and what are the principles of pedagogy, and how do I learn more about that? And also knowledge exchange. So the first stages in actually translating your research through to end use. So all of these areas are dimensions of the skills that you can develop which are going to help you further your career. And part of that, we're introducing from 2019 our core online research skills programs through the Researcher Development Unit. These include managing your research projects, so project management skills. They include working with your supervisor, so that's the other side of the coin in terms of supervision development. Looking at research methodology and in particular literature review. And then there are certain areas that faculties have that are specific to the faculty that they introduce into the skills programs. Moving on to industry-university collaboration. The university, as I mentioned before, really does want to help the higher degree researchers and in fact all of our researchers to understand more about how to engage with industry. So in terms of higher degree researchers, we have a number of programs that we're developing, and this really forms another framework that I'll explain here. The framework aims to really be flexible and to allow researchers to dip in and out or to commit totally to this pathway. So it allows everything from you being involved with industry through a mentor, so that may be a very short-term mentoring experience, or it may be something that lasts for 12 months or more. It also allows industry internships, and this is where there are either short-term industry experiences or, again, longer-term industry experiences. And then there is the industry-engaged PhD. And again, this can be something that's entrepreneurial, so done internally, much more at the IP development stage, or completely industry embedded, working on industry-focused problems. And finally, we have specialised programs, and these are structured programs which allow us to develop certain structures and work with other groups. And in this case, we've developed a program working with CSIRO called the iPhD. And that's a tripartite arrangement where we have an industry supervisor, a CSIRO supervisor, and a University of New South Wales supervisor, all working together in a team with the higher degree researcher. We're in our second round of recruitment for that, and Lena Caruso has been responsible for running that program. Now, the other area that we have structured programs is also our CNT programs, and we have CNT fellowships and CNT PhD scholarships, and Jonathan's going to introduce those. But before he takes the mantle up, and while we're changing the microphone, I'm just going to run another one of our videos, which is one of our CNT PhD scholars.
I'm looking at Indigenous sovereignty and how do Indigenous people embody that sovereignty, and therefore how does that disrupt colonial space and discourse. Many people have looked at Indigenous sovereignty, but I'm trying to decolonise that process and look at it from one mob's perspective or one mob's ways of knowing and being. So moving away from those generalisations of Indigenous or Aboriginal and looking at Wiradjuri country. What does that mean for Wiradjuri people? My research is especially important to me because I am a Wiradjuri woman and I'm a stolen generation descendant, so there's a lot of responsibility on me to restore that story, and that involves going back home and working with the community. At first I had this idea that learning the language was a means of communicating, but that is the last thing our language is about. Language is about story, it is about communication, it's about connection with the ancestors and the past. It's how we connect the stories that we have lost or have been oppressed throughout history. And it's how we reconnect and we heal and we become empowered. I think UNSW is really unique in that, yes, the main campus is here in Sydney, but the university actually does a lot in communities in Australia and internationally. The new equity and inclusion strategy, all these different factors are coming into play on a policy level that I think speaks to the social justice and the research integrity that this university holds. The Career and Professional Development Program through the CNTR Scholarship Scheme is really interesting because it allows us to connect as PhD students with that kind of expert knowledge from the field about an academic career or a career in the academy that extends outwards in the community. So something that is merely beyond this giant piece of writing that actually has an impact. The work I have done just within my first year, I never thought I would be able to achieve, and this position has enabled me to feel empowered and do more for my community.
Thank you everyone for coming, and it's my pleasure to talk a little bit about the CNT program. As you be well aware, the CNT program was a cornerstone of the strategy where the idea was to bring a whole new sort of diverse scholars and fellows to the university. So the first I'll talk about is CNT fellowships. These are the academic positions. There's 290 of these to be awarded in the next 10 years. We do an annual process here, and the logic behind the CNT Fellowship is to highlight and recruit high-quality academics at level B to D. It's both internal and external in terms of our recruitment, so we are currently recruiting both inside the university, looking for those star researchers, as well as attracting people from other institutions. So as you can see from the slide, we've made 63 appointments in this area already, with another 40 plus to be awarded in the coming months. As you can see that the application process here, we've had over 1,800 people contact us to express their interest in working at UNSW. And obviously it's a highly competitive environment. And what we're seeing already with these people that we're appointing is that they're getting fellowships, for external fellowships like NHMRC fellowships, DECRAs, future fellowships. So we truly are transforming some of the people that we've got with really high quality. Part of the CNT, as has been sort of discussed, is that they actually do get resources to do career development. And so part of the CNT fellowship scheme is to get these fellows to engage in career development and to seek external opportunities. And so it's a pathway both out to the world and also to engage in different areas. And so we view it as a really valuable part of the Division of Research profile for building our research quality. The CNT PhD Scholarship Scheme, as I hope you're all aware, is something that's been running for a few years now. Our ambition here is to have 700 new PhDs to 2025. Again, it's one of those cornerstones of the strategy to try and recruit people across the world. Again, it's available to domestic and international candidates. We do have targeted areas. For instance, Indigenous is particularly guaranteed that we have a number of scholarships awarded there. And I should have mentioned that in the fellowships, we also have put a heavy emphasis on trying to recruit Indigenous fellows to these positions. But with the CNT PhD scholarships, we've already appointed 192 people as of today, with hopefully another 8 to 9 to arrive very, very shortly. We're in the process of shortlisting and finalising our allocations for 2018 for another 125 scholarships. And the plan is that this will continue for several years from there. As you can see, we have had a massive interest in this program, 8,500 expressions of interest, the way we do this scheme. And from that, we have to then get the supervisors to select the people they'd like to nominate, which is why we've had 581 applications. The way the process works is that it's different from our other scholarship schemes because we actually recruit academics to nominate projects in areas of research strength and then we ask them to assemble a high quality supervision team. So it consists of 3 people. And the idea here is that 3 academics are going to form a strong supervision team. One of them has responsibility for mentoring and career development, but clearly are all involved in the project ideally. And the idea here is that we're giving our candidates the highest quality supervision. It very much is a testing ground for us too at I guess in the Division of Research and particularly in research training, because some of the things we're rolling out in the CNT programs, we're actually going to be diversifying out into the general population of UNSW. So we're really using this as a way of seeing if some of these things will really work the way we expect them to. What we've done in terms of recruitment, in terms of these projects, is that we tend to focus on 9 areas to try and get people to think quite diversely. So interdisciplinary is definitely one area that we really emphasise, and what we've found really pleasingly is that we are getting cross-faculty projects now that I think are really starting to build some real engagement across the university. The other thing that's been really remarkable, of course, is the branding campaign that's gone with this, and what we've seen now is also that we believe that we're getting applications from universities that we perhaps hadn't always targeted or would hope to have got. A lot more top 100 university graduates are applying for these scholarships. And so we believe this is a fundamental change in the way we're starting to recruit our PhD scholars. So while we've been doing that, we've also been thinking about how do we actually finish the PhD. And so obviously producing a thesis is the critical part of a PhD. And I guess my role in the last 3 or 4 years has been to look at examination and bring some structure and I guess some review of this. And so as a part of that process, we've been reviewing the procedures and policies that we do have. And as Laura's referred to, you can consult the framework to see where those procedures and policies sit. But what we've done very recently is reviewed the thesis examination and really asked the question, in context of the Ocola review too, is like, what are we actually examining? So what do we actually ask the examiners to look at in a thesis? And so what we've really done is actually started to, I guess, identify or crystallise the criteria that we're actually asking examiners to do. And so therefore we've now got a new examination form that is actually asking examiners to really draw out those things that we think are really critical to high quality graduates. And one of the great things about that, I think, is that it's finally given us a mechanism to recognise the high quality research going on. And so from 2019, we're proposing to have a Dean's List, which will be for those theses that have been identified by external examiners to be of the absolute quality that we can actually list these people and recognise their contributions to the university. As part of that, as Laura also alluded to, we have the fact that obviously candidates do produce publications. And there's always been an interesting challenge of how do you incorporate your publications into a thesis. And so again, we took the opportunity this year to refine what we do, to streamline and to clarify, to make it more flexible. And so now is actually a process where candidates can incorporate a publication in lieu of a chapter. It's much more clear about how that can be achieved. And we've also provided a lot more guidance to candidates on what is acceptable in a thesis. And I think that's really valuable because I think it means that candidates can now sort of engage with this early and think about the high quality that they need, and that can reflect obviously in good examination outcomes. So that's all I would like to say today. So I'm going to introduce Lucy Jones, who's the director of the GRS, and she's going to tell us about the HDR calendar.
No video? Just kidding, just kidding. Okay, I'm just going to hold this. Okay, so now for something really exciting. After all of that really interesting information about some of the innovations that we're trying to drive in the graduate research space, one of the things that we've been busy working on is a new higher degree research calendar for next year. So many of you might know that the university is changing its calendar from 2019, known as 3+. And when this came online, we had to think about our current calendar and whether or not we could get any more flexibility out of the new calendar. Turns out we can, so this new calendar has provided us a really great opportunity to add some more flexibility for our candidates going on from next year. So the new HDR calendar, we will have 4 terms instead of 2. Currently we have 2 semesters. That means we'll have up to 4 start dates for our newly enrolled candidates and quite a lot of time around those start dates for people to actually commence studies. There's a lot more flexibility around taking leave and making changes to your candidature as an HDR. And importantly, 4 opportunities for thesis. I mean, you could submit your thesis at any time, I don't mind. But people tend to submit it twice a year on the census date of each semester. So we're opening up, that calendar opens up more opportunities for candidates to kind of get their thesis done. The calendar also means that our tuition fees can be split over 4 terms instead of 2. So that makes it a lot easier for some of our candidates who might be paying fees or who might be on particular types of sponsorships. So this is what 2019 looks like in our new calendar. You can see term 1, term 2, term 3 and a summer term at the end, bumping over into 2020. The principles that we have for our current HDR candidates is that no candidate should be disadvantaged in this transition. So this is a transition year into next year. We will ensure that no one's disadvantaged, particularly around thesis submission dates in 2019 and beyond. This afternoon, after today's research training town hall, we'll start to ramp up our communications with our candidates, with our supervisors, and we'll be sending some emails out to them this afternoon, I think, or tomorrow. So something a little less dry is our 3-minute thesis. So this is coming up on Monday the 17th of September at 4:30 p.m. All of the bigwigs at the university will be there, including 20 of the Chancellor's closest friends and donors or something. So in the newly refurbished Roundhouse, I think is there a video on this one? Oh, yes. So really 3MT, 3 minutes, 1 slide, fantastic opportunity for you to catch up on what our HDRs, really who are the engine room for research at the university, are doing.
I love 3-minute thesis. It's my favourite event of the year.
So inspiring to see all this amazing research that makes you feel really hopeful about the world and our capacity as humans to address some of these huge problems.
Contestants must adhere to the 3-minute time limit. They can only use one static slide and no props are allowed.
It's amazing to hear what people are doing across such a vast area, but also to describe their research in 3 minutes.
Take a look at this image on the top left side. It's a car. It's one of our dream cars. Yes, I'm talking about driverless cars.
I'm able to make nanoparticles which have a huge appetite for greenhouse gases. They feast on greenhouse gases, digesting them to produce fuels which are cleaner and greener than the fossil fuels we rely on today.
I've discovered a new family of viruses never before found in cane toads. Circoviruses are a causative agent of disease in pigs and birds, but the pathological potential in the cane toad is not known.
Leading a world-first trial, we at St Vincent's Hospital and UNSW have successfully replaced the mitral valve in human beings without stopping the heart and without using a heart-murmur machine.
My results suggest that independent auditing can assist charities to produce more transparent and reliable information in accordance with the reporting standards, so that users have more credible information about charities' activities, such as how much donation the charity has received and how it has utilized its fundings.
Tonight, we have 3 schools representing the Aspire program as VIP guests. Aspire is a UNSW outreach program that works with school students to support their educational aspirations.
Oh, there's no better night of entertainment. There were so many interesting stories, personal stories. I felt really invested in a lot of these stories. You could see what's at stake.
It's not about dumbing it down, it's about really explaining things in lay terms. So the research is absolutely important, but I think also the engagement with the audience, the communication skills, and I think the other thing is that sort of personalised, personal touch. So actually being able to bring the research story to the people.
Okay, great words for Laura to conclude. Okay, so I think... Oh! Do you not want to see it again? Okay. I think we're going to move over to questions now before afternoon tea.
They would like to ask from the audience. We've got plenty up here, but if anybody wants to say anything, ask a question, please feel free. We'll go for this. Okay. So, the top question is the CNT... Oh, no, it's been bumped off. That's good.
So thanks, Laura. So I was wondering if there's been any movement on the process of the examination. So the way we do things in Australia is obviously a little different than it is around the world. And I was just wondering if we'd discussed that activity and whether we were thinking of changing the way we examine theses.
You're talking about oral exams.
I am talking about oral exams.
So yes, we are doing this, and in fact part of the MPhil review was to recognise that we can use the MPhil as a pilot program for oral examinations. So that's the plan at the moment, while we also have been working actively on how to fund oral examinations going forward. But I think everything's sort of in place. It's just we just got to do it. And but it's definitely happening.
So, that one came back to the top. There we go. Is the CNT scholarship available to enrolled PhD students?
I think there's a linked one further down or can they transfer to it?
No. That's it. It's no. And that's a really good example of a question which is a yes-no question, and that's all I have to say. But what I will say is that the CNT scholarship program is actually a 4-year program, so that's why it's not available for people to transfer into. Industrial PhDs are not offered to international candidates. Actually, that's not quite correct. We have an iPhD program, which is a specialist program which involves CSIRO. And one of CSIRO's requirements is that they can't take on international candidates into the program. So that's one of the reasons why we've expanded out the framework, and we will be looking at definitely industry-engaged PhDs which have our international candidates. And certainly there's another question in there about, I think, about Scientia, and can you do industry engagement with Scientia programs? Absolutely yes. So, and a very high percentage of our Scientia candidates are international. So yes, if there is an industry-engaged question being answered, and if industry is involved in the program, certainly international candidates can engage with that. So this is a good question. You're doing career development for Scientia programs. What are you doing for the rest of candidates? I'm going to start you off, and then Cecilia might want to answer as well. Look, it's a great question. We have experienced quite a lot of challenging times with embedding career development into PhD programs. It's not something that has been smooth. And I think that it is an experiment. It's something that I think that candidates are very engaged with, but we've really had to try and change the culture of supervisors to understand that you need to take time to do these career development activities. So the Scientia program is somewhat an experiment, and it's actually starting to show some really great successes. What we have done is we've also developed some of these programs which are actually available for all candidates. And so by doing it, by starting it off using the Scientia program, we can then offer some of the career development programs out to all candidates. And certainly Cecilia can give you a couple of examples of some of the things that we're doing that are translating into something available for all candidates.
Thank you. Can you actually hear me through this one, and then you can keep that? Or do you want me to use that one? Okay. As you know, as Laura has indicated, with the Scientia program, we're trialling a number of different approaches and developing resources whilst doing so. Some of those resources will be cascaded down and are available or will be available in 2019. So there's a mentoring resource, for example. There are also workshops that we have developed in collaboration with the CNT Research and Development team that are also we offer more generally. So there is a lot of that. We've also, as a result of this, some of you may know about the Extend Your Career framework that we have more broadly, but there will be one that is currently under development called the High Degree Research Candidates Extend framework. So it's much more specific to HDR candidates, and so that is also going to be a resource. Those are probably the main things. We're also trialling them with a number of faculties as well, and we run those at various levels across the board. In addition, with our Essentials of Supervision program, we have actually included career development as part of that so that we can support supervisors in looking at the career development aspects. So it's about a holistic approach. And the other thing is, notice there's a question up there about assessment of programs, and are we just, with some implication about why or how we are doing it. We are piloting a lot of these things so that we can ensure that they are targeted, that they are useful, and they aren't wasting your time. So that's what we're doing, and we're progressively rolling out that which works and that which seem to give the support that you need.
I'm going to tackle some of those HDR calendar questions. Okay, so number one up here, will the new calendar be applicable for current HDR students? Yes. So we have to migrate everybody onto the new calendar from Term 1 2019. Term 1 2019 begins mid-February. But in doing that, none of our current HDR candidates will be disadvantaged. So what will happen with our current HDR candidates is you'll be able to log into GRIS, which is the online system you're used to, and it will show you your new thesis submission date. So that will show you how it's working with the transition. There was another HDR down the bottom. So for 1.5 years MPhil, students starting enrolment from S1 2018 is the thesis submission date from August 2019 to June 2019. Actually, it's September 2019, so you get another bonus month. It's great. More ways that this calendar can benefit you.
All right, do you want me to do the effectiveness of training programs?
Yep.
Okay, I did notice the effectiveness of training programs, and like anything, training, I'm glad you asked the question, because assessing programs, assessing training is both the bane of my life and the pleasure of my life, because training per se can be a number of different things to different people. So I'd like to just briefly highlight a couple of principles that we have put in place around our training. First of all, there is training that you must do, compliance-related training. And just for your information, much of that we actually haven't designed. It's been purchased and it's been rolled out on Moodle or something like that. And so the only measurements there are completions or assessment. We recognise that some of those are not the ideal packages, and as a result of feedback that we've received, those will be redeveloped down the track when we actually have funding or when we have a bit more time and resourcing.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
The other way that we're assessing the effectiveness of some of the programs is actually doing some graduate destination work. So we're currently engaged in a survey, a very large survey across pretty much all the GO8, looking at graduate destinations across 3 different cohorts, and it's a 3-year study. So it's quite an extensive study. It's based on a survey that came out of the Council of Graduate Schools in the USA. So they're doing an equivalent study, so we will be able to benchmark with the USA, which I think will be very interesting.
And the other thing I would add is that anything that we've designed internally is it's designed to identify, it's based on the assessment of gap. What do people need? What is the gap? How do we design the solution? We actually assess those, we review those, and that's quite extensive in the short term, so it's much more quantitative. Qualitatively, as many of you will know, how do we actually have results, outputs, and impact? And that takes time, and so we are following those, we're tracking those, and we're looking at the engagement and the difference they make with focus groups, etc. So we're using a range of methodologies is the answer. And yes, if it doesn't work, it goes.
So the question from MLK, which keeps asking about, if I have to leave early, can we still watch this online? Yes, this is being recorded, and yes, it'll be available for download. I was also then answered Grant Kelly's question first. Yes, the new details are available. They're in the thesis examination procedure. And also on the GRS website, there's also more information there, which answers is the new policy has also been answered. Now, the policy that PhDs need a senior joint supervisor prevents early career researchers from collaborating on PhD supervision. He lacks badly with a maximum 1 CNT PhD person. I'm going to hand this over. No. I mean, the thing about supervision, as we've talked about, is that obviously we have to ensure that we have high quality and that there is experience there. And so we fully understand that 2 early career researchers will have much interest in doing supervision, but we also believe you do need to have some help there and some support. And so our procedure is built to give you that support. So I think in that respect, it's just a case of you can still be the primary, an ECA can still be the primary, and you can still have secondary. These are terms, I guess, and so we can talk about, you can still interact and be involved heavily in the research. It's not limiting you in that respect. The one CNT PhD per person, what that means is that we let 1 primary supervision for each academic. We're not allowing multiple. And I believe that that's a deliberate policy we've done to ensure that there is actually breadth, that we're not just giving the scholarships to a few individuals. I think we all strongly believe that there's so many high-quality researchers at this university, and so I appreciate that's a challenge, but I think it's something that can be done effectively. I've got a question over there. So.
So I'm going to de-anonymize myself as the person who asked that question.
Sure. Thank you.
So no, the policy explicitly says that a joint needs to co-supervise, and a joint supervisor is a primary supervisor, which means that if the senior joint that you want to apply with for a Scientia fellowship has their own Scientia application has their own Scientia application, which they often do, it kind of prevents you from applying for a Scientia application. It also means you have to settle for whoever is left and whoever did not apply by themselves and take the hit that you will be getting based on the metrics that are used for judging that senior person.
I mean, yeah, look, I take your point, but I think it's, you know, our experience is that early career researchers have the best of intentions sometimes, but they do still need that support. We try to accommodate as best we can, but I mean, and it is challenging in some schools, I know, with the number of available people, but you can actually have a joint supervisor from outside your own school. It doesn't have to be even in your own faculty, so there is you know, scope to really expand that, and I think there was a little bit of murkiness in the policy before that we refined to make sure that it is clear that you can go across school or across faculty to get that, to broaden that base. But I mean, that's our position at the moment, is that we feel it's something that's still critical. But I do take your point, and happy to discuss it later. So the top question there is, can the CNT PhD program run concurrently with the scholarship round rather than sequentially? We lost some great students due to the length of time taken. I fully acknowledge that it is a challenging process, and part of it's to do with systems, but originally the plan was for CNT was to run twice a year. I proposed this to the Associate Deans of Research Training, and I think we all acknowledged that this was not a realistic timeframe, coupled with the 4 scholarship rounds that we already had. What I can say in 2019 is that we're dropping to 3 scholarship rounds for the RTP with 1 Scientia. We're looking for efficiencies to make this a faster process, and I think as we build, anybody who's applied for Scientia this year compared to last year knows that the process was, I think, much better, and it's an evolution of the method, and so definitely our goal is to speed this up if we can. We just can't, I don't want to overpromise at this point.
I'd just like to add to that point that those who've been successful in getting candidates in the first couple of rounds of Scientia have really cottoned on to the fact that it's an always-on campaign. So identifying a candidate who will be suitable for the project that you want to put up, that can be done at any time. And as Jonathan mentioned, we're kind of truncating the scholarship rounds next year. So still always 1 Scientia, but 3 RTP rounds to complement that.
So we're moving right along to why are academics considered the best people to provide career mentoring to candidates? I'm not sure we actually state anywhere that academics are the best people, but certainly the academic supervisor has a role in that career conversation. We have a wonderful team within the Scientia group which actually run workshops on career development, and they're run by career coaches. So those are people who are trained career coaches, and they are assisting with the career development aspects. And I think it's very important for our academics to be involved with that conversation. Many of our candidates actually do want to go on and have an academic career, and I think the academics are the best person to advise on that side of things.
I'll just add something, and then you can add something, and then Jonathan can add something. Okay, don't take too long. What I would add to this is we recognise that this is a really, really different model. So in the Scientia program, one of your supervisors is an identified career mentor. The supervisory roles are shifting in higher degree research, and so more and more there is more and more onus on supervisors to help their candidates with career advice post-PhD. So we're actually pushing this point, making it explicit up front. Yep.
I was just also going to say that supervisors don't have to be academics. We have a Scientia scholar who has a supervisor who's actually from industry, and so it's perfectly able to have secondary supervisors from outside the university. So you can use that person as the career mentor.
And I'd just like to add, with the thing that I've just dropped on the ground, that we're making a very good impression here. Mentoring is actually based on what the mentee, the HDR candidate, requires. And a mentee or an HDR candidate can drive their own mentoring experience in addition to having someone who's been identified as your mentor. That means that you can actually go outside that as a provided mentor from time to time if you cannot get the answers there. There is something that the HR team have put into place called Career Collaborator, which is something you can also consider utilising if you'd like to find people other than your current supervisor mentor. And you have options. So please consider that. If you've got a question that you need answered and you can't find it, think about where you can, who you can talk to about that. That's what mentoring is. It's meeting your requirement when you need it. And you can't always find that in the same place all the time.
Thank you, Lucy. What are we up to? Anything about making it easier to have true cross-faculty PhDs? Look, that's a really great question, and I think that we actually do have many true cross-faculty PhDs in terms of in practice, the PhD has a supervisor from 2 faculties. They work very well together in teams. I'm thinking of some across the built environment, in the sustainable cities and materials engineering. That's one really great example where they've got some great things happening. Across arts and social sciences and law, there's some really fantastic ones happening. I think what's a barrier very often is the administrative structures around PhDs and the way that PhDs are funded. What I always say is just don't let that get in your way. That's Lucy's.
Woohoo, money. Okay, so the amount of fees to be paid for every semester. So instead of your tuition fee being divided by 2, it gets divided by 4. So you pay quarterly each term instead.
Easy. Guaranteeing access of HDRs to teaching and tutoring opportunities. Look, that's something that we actually can't do. The teaching and allocation of teaching duties is run directly from the faculties. However, what we have done is we've engaged with the academic division to set up a program called Beginning to Teach, and that Beginning to Teach program is available to all higher degree researchers and early career researchers. And why we did that was really for people who were in research centres, medical research institutes, places like that, where they didn't get an opportunity to teach. So this is a way of getting introduced into teaching and you know, really starting off your understanding of pedagogy. Then hopefully you can actually ultimately get into some teaching, but it's something that you do need to talk to your faculty officers about.
So the visa delay question. So large visa delays are causing great problems for HDR numbers. Can UNSW become more involved in lobbying government to speed up the process? So absolutely, we are involved in lobbying the government to speed up the process. UNSW is, but also all universities in Australia are. This is a sector-wide problem, particularly if you're applying from a visa from particular countries. So we do as much as we can in this space, and we have good contacts in the department, but it's been very challenging to get much traction on this for all universities. So sorry I can't give a better answer for candidates there.
We have to start to finish up now. We're coming up to a little bit before 1:15, so I think we've got about 5 minutes. I think there's a question that's just popped up there. If I feel that my research may need input or guidance from another faculty, what should I do? I think that that's something that I would really encourage you, number one, to talk to your supervisor. Make sure that you're not disappearing off and going down different tracks without talking to your supervisor. So number one, have a chat to your supervisor. And really, I think number two is to work out from your perspective who might be the best people that you could work with in other faculties, or indeed it could be even in other universities or in industry or wherever. And have a chat really to your supervisor about how you might do that and how you might make the approach. So certainly that's something that's absolutely doable and fine, but talk to your supervisor first. Opportunities for industry internships for current HDRs. We have several internship programs that are set up and run through the Co-op Scholarship Office. One of those is 3M, I believe. But we also have the APR intern system, which used to be the old AMPSI intern. And those opportunities are advertised, I believe, in our graduate news, I think. So if you have a look at the graduate news, you can see all of those internship programs coming up, and you can certainly apply for those, and there's lots available. Language support. Language support for international candidates. We fund a program called the Helier Program, which Mira Kim from Faculty of Arts and Sciences runs. It's actually underway right now, and I believe we have almost 100 higher degree researchers undertaking that program. And it's a really fantastic program. If you want to hear more about it, let us know. The other place that's really fantastic and is really helpful on academic writing is the Learning Centre, and they certainly do assist candidates with their academic writing. And I think we also develop staff members to assist candidates with their academic writing and English skills.
Are we realistically expecting new PhD students to start in the summer term? No. So in our new HDR calendar, that's an option. So most faculties will probably choose terms 1, 2 and 3 to accept new enrolments. But you know, there's always going to be one supervisor who has the keenest student ready to start December 13, and if that happens, we can get them enrolled this time and we don't have to wait till next year. So sometimes we might enrol candidates in summer, but typically no. Typically they'll enrol in T1 or probably T3. We've got a lot more flexibility though.
Is it mandatory? Yes, if you've got less than 2 completions, then it's mandatory and it is face-to-face.
Sorry about the air conditioning. And yes, the presentation will be made available.
This is very starting to get vertigo. They're flashing up so quickly. The industry engaged PhD is extensive industry engagement.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. The answer is yes to that. So certainly knowledge exchange and industry engagement under the CNT PhD program is absolutely possible.
I think I answered the fees question before, but the submission deadline. So submission deadlines, what I mean that you can submit at any time is you have 4 years to do a PhD or 2 years to do a master's. You don't have to wait till the final day of the 4th year to submit your thesis, although many candidates do. You could submit at 3 years, 3.5, 3.25, whatever you want to do. But what happens at our university is people like to rush till that last absolute drop deadline, and so that's typically when they submit their thesis, which is totally fine as well. So in our new system, you still have 4 years for your PhD, you still have 2 years for your PhD, and so on the last day of that 4 years, you can still submit your thesis.
I think this one is a Cecilia one in terms of revision process, but in essence, absolutely. Yep. We have an ongoing process of examining the feedback, looking at the turn-up rate, all of that sort of thing, and if we have something that's not really cutting it, then it doesn't get run. So we do have an active process of evaluating. I think the Indigenous question is really probably a great one to finish on. Can we finish? It's a fantastic one to finish on because just recently Megan Davis, our Pro Vice-Chancellor Indigenous, has been developing the Indigenous strategy. And this really, one of the pillars of the strategy is around growing our own. So it's about being collegiate, about not necessarily going around and poaching the very small number of Indigenous people that are out there in academia. It's about really encouraging Indigenous candidates coming up through the pipeline and making sure that we're really encouraging our Indigenous undergrads into PhD programs where appropriate. So we very definitely are working a broad range of strategies, not just Scientia.
I'd also mention last year was the launch of UNSW's own Indigenous Studies PhD through Nuragili, and we think that will also be a way of recruiting really fantastic Indigenous candidates to the university. So we're trying to maximise a number of different ways actually.
So we may finish up now. We will try to address any burning questions in feedback sessions that's come out here in follow-up. We will also have all the slides available. We're also available here now for afternoon tea, so please join us for afternoon tea, and if you have any other questions, we'd be delighted to answer them. And I'd just like to thank everybody for coming and all the presenters.